Masechet Batra Daf Pei Bet rather, 12 lines down. Amar Rav Nachman says something interesting. Naktin, we have a minhag. Dekil en lo geza. A date palm tree does not have a trunk. Now, that's strange because we know it does have a trunk. Savar Rav Zvid Lemimar. Maybe Rav Zvid thought to maybe explain it as follows. En lo geza bilabal dekil. The owner of the buyer yani does not have rights to the trunk. Maybe it just still belongs to the seller. The because since the tree is going to end up die when it dies, it'll be uprooted. Maybe he abandons and has yeush, he gives up hope on ever acquiring anything that grows out of the trunk. But in the case of our Mishnah, where you bought two trees, and therefore you don't acquire the land. Therefore, the trees are going to end up dying, and definitely will not be keeping anything afterward because you have to uproot it. But and our Mishnah still teaches that you do have the rights from the trunk. So we see that you do have access. The Gemara says, okay, the owner of the palm, the buyer, has no rights to whatever grows from the trunk. Because it doesn't usually produce anything. The Gemara says, okay, our Mishnah is a question because our Mishnah mentions that you do keep it. The Gemara says no. And therefore it does exist. The Gemara says no. The Mishnah is talking about a case where someone bought a tree for a minimum of 5 years. You have rights to the land for 5 years, and therefore he's not giving up on anything that grows there because I have 5 years here minimum, and therefore I know that anything grows out, I could get it, and therefore there's no yeush, and therefore he keeps it. Okay. Kanesh losha kana karka. Our Mishnah says something that we're going to be talking about for the next couple of days. When you acquire 3 trees, it's considered a field of trees, and you acquire the land in and around it. Right, so remember that. When you acquire a field of 3 trees, you acquire the land around it because it's a field of trees, which means if it's too far away and therefore it's not considered a field of trees, you don't acquire the land. If it's too close, it's not considered a field, you also don't acquire the land. If it's not 3 trees, it's also not considered a field of trees, you don't acquire the land. So in order to acquire the land between these 3 trees, if you buy the 3 trees in a certain amount of space, and that way you acquire the land in between. If you buy them separately, it won't count, like we'll see. Okay. Vikama, how much land do you acquire? You acquire the land directly under the tree. So now we're talking about 3 trees. We'll look at it like a triangle. So let's say the 3 trees are in each corner of the triangle. You acquire the land by the corners of the triangle. And between the trees, yani the entire circumference of that triangle, if that's the right word, the inside part of that triangle. Not only that, the area outside the trees, yani behind the corners of the triangle, on the outside looking in, you also acquire. Because you have to have enough space for a guy to pick the fruits and with a ladder and harvest the fruits. So you do get some extra space outside. We know that when you sell a property, Rabbi Akiva holds that you sell it generously, which means that I don't get there's no access to the path. So now if I don't have a path, I don't have access for my picker to stand on the other guy's property. How does that make sense? Where it says no, the reason why you don't have a path is because that land belongs to someone else. Right? How now he's explaining the question. He says, 1 second. He doesn't have a path because it belongs to the other guy, the field who's outside my triangle of trees. But now I'm able to put my guy to stand on top of his property to harvest. Definitely not. The Gemara says no. Only when you buy 3 trees, you don't have a path because they're on someone else's land. But if you bought 2 trees, you do acquire a path to the trees. Because you can tell the seller about right? So he's sending a side note, by the way. He says, listen, the only reason why I don't have a path on 3 trees is because it belongs to the other guy. And I bought that land with those 3 trees. I'm acquiring that triangle of land. But if I have 2 trees, I do have land because obviously I'm buying myself access to the land that I just bought. It's to the trees I just bought because I didn't buy any land. I mean, what am I do? Drop from the helicopter to land on my trees? No, I didn't buy land. In the case of the triangle, we tell you, tough luck. You have property, but you can't visit your property. Okay. Okay, now I'm maybe Rabbi disagreed with Shmuel, his rabbi. Shmuel said, "Halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. A person sells something generously, and therefore, even when you're selling 3 trees, you also give the guy a path." So seemingly, Rabbi holds he started off saying from here that I'm not you automatically don't have a path. Seemingly, he holds that you don't sell it generously. You're selling it stingily. So he argues against his rabbi. The Gemara says, no. He said, Rabbi Azar said that this Mishnah, the halacha with the trees, can't be go according to Rabbi Akiva. And therefore, if you're not going with Rabbi Akiva, that means you're going to Hachamim, who say that you sell stingily. You sell stingily, there's no path. And he's talking, okay, if you hold it, there's no path, what are we going to do about the situation about having the guy picking the fruits? How is he picking the fruits? But he holds, maybe he'll hold with the rabbi of Shemuel that you hold like Rabbi Akiva that there would be a path. Okay, we might. So what? I mistakenly said that earlier that Rabbi Akiva held the opposite. My mistake. Rabbi Akiva holds that you would get a path. This Mishnah was my case like the Hafamim where you don't get a path. Okay, correction. We might. Now, what convinced the other that our Mishnah has to be like Hafamim that there's no path? It was from the fact that our Mishnah taught that if you bought trees and they grew over the seller's land, the seller can trim them. If you hold like Rabbi Akiva, you sell it generously, we have to cut it. The seller sells it generously, which means if you have your trees grow over my land that I sold to you, if your trees that I sold to you grow over my land, which is outside your property, don't worry about it. I'm generous. So we must be from there that the fact that we can't do that, and he has to cut it down, shows that he must have sold it stingily. Gemara says, no, Marlet. When did I say Rabbi Akiva holds that a person sells it generously? Is in the case of like a pit. Because it doesn't affect my land. Right now, I'm selling you a pit. I'll keep it. I don't care. Generous. Yeah, path. Yeah, no problem. I don't care. However, in the case of a tree, who says that it's considered he would allow it? Who says that I would allow your trees to grow over my property? It's going to damage my property, this extra shade. Milo de Akiva also would agree. If the Mishnah mentioned that if your item is growing over my property and I want to walk with my animal, I get to cut as high of a height that it takes for oxen with a load and people on top to ride. We had it previously in the Masechet. So we see from here that Rabbi Akiva would hold in cases of loss and or cases of obstruction that you can cut. And therefore, Rabbi Ezer's assumption that Rabbi Akiva would not agree with our Mishnah is seemingly mistaken. Okay, we prove according to Rabbi Batra says, if the buyer bought the land under a tree, and between the trees, he also acquires the land outside for the guy to pick the fruits, like we mentioned. The question that space, right? So that's we call it 6 inches outside the property for the guy to put up his ladder and pick the trees. Who can plant there? Does that mean if the buyer can put his guy up on the ladder, maybe I can plant there? Maybe I can't. Mark says, answer them back. Tenei of Mishnah, the outside guy, the owner of the field is able to plant it. The inner guy, the triangle guy, even though he can use it, he can't plant there. Mark says, he says, hold on a second. Midami. How can you compare that case of that Mishnah with the following? Hatam, in the case of that path, there's no loss. Right? In the case of that Mishnah we just brought, it's not a case where there's no loss, where they agreed that you can use the path over there, you can have access, but there's no loss. But over here, in the case of this field, the triangle field owner is gonna lose because why? He can tell the seller, if you are planting seeds and it's starting to grow stuff outside, right where my fruits are dropping from the trees out of my triangle, the problem is that when the fruits drop and it hits your mustard seeds or whatever it is, it's going to ruin my fruits. Maybe it's different. Where it says, okay, we'll prove from a different case of that Mishnah. The case of the inner garden or of the outer garden cannot plant on the path. Seemingly, over here as well, we're going to compare that case to the case of the ladder space that nobody could plant there. Exactly what we just said. In the case of the field, with the trees that were purchased, that triangle, you cannot plant in that ladder spot. Okay. How much space must be between the trees to be considered the field of trees? How do you make this triangle? How much space? Can I have one tree 300 miles away? Oh, 3 trees, I buy everything. No. Minimum is 4 amot apart and maximum is 8 amot apart. If it's under 4, it's not considered a field, and therefore you should put the trees. If it's over 8, then it's also not considered a field because it's too far away. Says name Nachman. משמונה ועד 16, 8 to 16. אמר רבי יוסף, רבי יוסף, לא תפלוג עליה דרב נחמן. Don't argue with Reb Nachman. דתנא מעתתנא כבתי כתב במשנה according to him. דתנא המשנה says, הנוטע את כרמו 16 אמה על 16 אמה. Someone plants a vineyard in rows that are 16 amot apart. מותר להביא זרע לשם. I'm able to plant in between the rows. So since they're so far apart, I can plant in between. And there's no problem with kilayim. Because it's so far apart, it's not considered a vineyard, therefore they're not mixing. Marabida, Masib someone I have a story in Talmud. The guy who did this 16 amot by 16 amot, and each two rows of vineyards of grapes, 16 amot apart, would face each other, the vineyards, the vines. And in between every other spot, which would be empty after those two vines, every two row, as a row A, row B facing each other, row C would not be facing, there would be nothing. You have to plant there. The following year, he would turn the branches to cover the previous spot where he planted the other stuff, and then he would see the new area, the new emptied area, and he would alternate the spots. When they came for Hamim, and they allowed it. So we see from here that 16 amot apart are not considered a vineyard, which proves, according to Reb Nachman, that trees spaced 16 amot apart are also not considered a field of trees, and you don't acquire any land. I don't know what kind of proof this is. I'll give you that. But I do know of a story. Huh? The guy tells you, "Oh, I heard halacha, great, but I saw the Hamavayas have to do this." Okay, let's saw. The town of shepherds. Right, it was where someone bought trees, 3 trees that were less than 8 amot apart, and the question is the land included? They came in front of Yehuda. They told the seller, "Go give him the land between the buyer." Go give him the land between the trees, enough space for the oxen and the plowing accessories to pass through. How much is the space? Is a pair of oxen and the plowing accessories? The Mishnah says it clearly. A person should not plant the tree next to his friend's field unless he spaces it 4 amot away. Why 4? But over there. 4 amot there. Enough space for the plowing. Amina, we see from here, we see from here that the space of an oxen is 4 amot, which proves that Nachman is seemingly incorrect, and we hold that 4 amot is necessary and not 8 to 16. What's up here?